What's up, YouTube? Alright, as promised, I am going to give you the story of, that's upside down, of Layla. This is my copy. It is released in 11/9/1970, so November 9th, 1970 is when it was released. It was recorded in most of August and a little bit of September during 1970. Our key players here are Eric Clapton. Derek is Eric. Let's make that clear right now, because it caused some problems when the album was released. Derek of Derek and the Dominoes is Eric Clapton. So first key player. Second key player, George Harrison of the Beatles. Very important guy in this. Third player, Pattie Boyd. She was a model, married to George Harrison. This is supposed to be an original pressing, and everything on the labels and the sleeve and everything indicate that. It was advertised as such. I bought it as such. The thing that weirds me out is that this is a 2-disc album. They are colored discs, which was kind of weird in 1970. Not impossible. I actually have some Beatles recordings on the way that are colored, and I know that they're originals, so it wasn't impossible to do. I'll have to look that up a little more, but it was sold to me as an original. I'm going to call it an original until I prove otherwise. It is labeled, marked, everything original. It sounds pretty OG. And I have some notes on this, because I did do a bit of research. I know most of the story up here in my head, but I wanted to make sure I got everything right for you guys. So, Eric Clapton, he was in a ton of bands, but the ones that we want to focus on here: Cream, Blind Faith, Delaney and Bonnie. George Harrison, obviously the Beatles. He's one of the most famous people in the world. Then Pattie Boyd, she was a model. She was hired for the movie A Hard Day's Night for the Beatles. All the Beatles were smitten with her, but George definitely took a major liking. They started seeing each other in 1964. They got married in 1966. This is also when they all met Eric Clapton. Clapton at the time, I think he had just left the Yardbirds. He was getting into John Mayall's Blues Breakers. Clapton didn't have, obviously he didn't have the level of fame that Harrison had, but he was the musician's musician. They called him God. He was the guitar player, basically, until Hendrix came along. So Harrison immediately took a liking to Clapton. Clapton got to hang out with the Beatles. Harrison got to hang out with like a real musician. This guy, he just plays the blues and he's a great guitar player, and that's kind of what Harrison wanted at that point. But he also, he took Pattie everywhere with him. They're newlyweds, they're in love, blah, blah, blah. He invited Clapton to play on While My Guitar Gently Weeps, which is notable because nobody got to play on Beatles songs except Paul, John, George, and Ringo. So that's cool. And a lot of Beatles songs, a lot of Clapton songs, a lot of other people's songs are written about Pattie. She inspired a lot of good music. So Clapton, he leaves John Mayall very, very shortly. They only did one album, the Beano album. Very good album, but that's the only thing they did. He buys a place called Hurtwood Edge. It's a cottage in southern England. And Pattie starts kind of hanging out with Eric. Coming over as a friend at this point. As a friend. Just, making sure Eric's okay. Hanging out with him, talking music, doing all that. Hanging out with him at Hurtwood Edge. Eric starts developing feelings and there's this party somewhere. I don't know where it is. It's not really specified anywhere, actually. But there's a party, and George doesn't want to go, but tells Patty, go ahead. So she goes, and Eric's there. And they both go by themselves in the garden, and Eric starts playing music for her. And George decides to go to the party. He shows up later, and Eric and Patty are in this garden alone, and Eric's playing for Patty, and George goes, "Hey, what's going on? You're alone with my wife, playing music, what the fuck's going on, brother?" And Eric just blurts out. He says, "I'm in love with your wife." And George is understandably angry. And he turns to Patty and says, you can you can come home with me right now, or you can stay here with Eric. Your choice. And Patty goes home with George. So Eric, he's in despair, But he goes and he gets this album together. And now we'll skip to more of the album. It has basically the rhythm section from Delaney and Bonnie, who Eric was touring with at the time. He was in Cream supergroup with Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce. He achieved a lot of fame that way. They broke up. I think they were together for 2 or 3 years. They broke up. He started Blind Faith with Steve Winwood. But he got all those, he got a lot of addictions from being in the supergroup and the fame and everything and all that. And Eric doesn't really like to be, famous. Like, every time he achieves, stardom, he kind of brings it down. That's kind of who Eric is. Obviously he wants to just, play music his whole life and all that. But he doesn't, Beatles stardom would have fucked Eric up pretty quick, I think. But anyway, so he's playing with Delaney and Bonnie, and he kind of goes off on his own, puts himself in isolation, and the rhythm section, Bobby Whitlock, who he's kind of a multi-instrumentalist. He plays a lot of keys, but he can play anything. Jim Gordon is a drummer. Very good drummer. Carl Rattle, excellent bassist. A lot of people don't realize that, especially on the Layla album. I know it's very much a guitar album, especially because of our fourth player here. But it's very much a guitar album. But you can pay attention to the bass in there, and it's very good and on point. So that's Carl Rattle. So they're the rhythm section for Delaney and Bonnie. They go to Eric and say, "Hey, man, let's just jam. Let's just have something to play." And Eric's got all these songs about Patty in his head, and he's like, "Yeah, you know what? Let's go." So they go and they book a studio with Tom Dowd at his Atlantic South in Miami, Florida. At the same time, the Allman Brothers are recording, I believe it's their second album, I think. It's called All the Wild South in Miami, and they have a very excellent guitarist named Dwayne Allman. So, and Tom Dowd is producing All the Wild South as well. So, of course, Tom tells Dwayne, "Hey, Eric and some of his friends are coming by to record, don't bother them." But Dwayne's all geeked up. He's a big Eric Clapton fan. He says, "Hey, man, can you just ask him if I can watch? If I can just come by and watch." And Tom's like, "All right, cool." So he relays this to Eric, and Eric's like, "What? You mean the guy that played on Wilson Pickett albums and all this other stuff?" Dwayne was he was in the Allman Brothers, but he was also a session guitarist. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a really good album out there, Dwayne Allman Anthology, that has all that session stuff on it. I don't have it, but it is a great album if you just want pure Dwayne. I think I have it on CD. It would be cool to get it. I don't even know if it's on vinyl, but it would be cool to get it on vinyl. Anyway, so that the night that Eric and his boys come in, the Allman Brothers are playing a show in Miami, and Eric wants to go see them. So they show up. Of course, Eric, they get front row seats, all that. Eric's right there watching Dwayne, all that. And Eric actually, there's a quote from Eric where he says, Dwayne is the first guitarist since Jimi Hendrix to just completely blow me away, which is pretty high praise. So after the show, Eric says, hey, I know you want to come by the studio. And they're in the same building, different studios, but same building. Eric says, if you come by the studio, bring your guitar. So Dwayne winds up on most of the album. There's 3 tracks that he doesn't play on. And I knew that there was 3 tracks that he doesn't play on, but I didn't know which ones, and I tried to guess. So I'll tell you which ones I guessed, and I'll tell you which ones they actually were, because I was completely wrong. So there's 3 tracks that Dwayne doesn't play on, but everything else he's on. And the way that you can distinguish, there's a few ways that you can distinguish Eric and Dwayne on the album. First is most of the leads are played by Dwayne and improvised by Dwayne. Any slide guitar, played by Dwayne. Nobody in 1970, the only person that is going to compete with Dwayne Allman on a slide guitar is Johnny Winter. That's the only person. Dwayne Allman is just king of the slide guitar. There's nobody that's going to compete with him. And even to this day, there's not very many guitarists that are going to compete with him on slide. And most of it, he's playing in open E. Not my favorite slide tuning, but, each their own. The other huge major difference, which you can't always tell because they swapped guitars a lot during the recording, but for the most part, Dwayne is playing his Les Paul, and Eric is playing one of his 3 Strats, the Sunburst one, and then Blackie and Brownie. So Eric on Strat, Dwayne on the Les Paul. If you're a guitar player, you should be able to pick out the difference. But also remember, they swapped guitars quite a few times. For a long time, Eric was a Les Paul guy, and he wanted to play Dwayne's. And Dwayne could play anything, so it didn't matter. So they swapped guitars a lot. So that's not always right. Anyway, let's get into the album. Starts with I Looked Away. And I believe that, now this is all my interpretation. If you interpret it differently, fine. This is all my interpretation. So I looked away, and this is without Dwayne. Dwayne is not on this. Not one that I guessed. But I believe that it's about that party that Petty and Eric were at. And Eric really had a shot, but part of him was still like, this is one of my best friend's wives. I can't, nobly. He said, I can't do this. So he kind of blew his shot there. I think that had a lot to do with it. And then we go into Bell Bottom Blues. Great song, man. Every time I hear this song, it gets stuck in my head. Second song without Dwayne. Not one that I guessed. And it's really just Eric being lovesick, man. Do you want me to crawl across the floor to you? I don't want to fade away. He's just, he realizes he kind of screwed up back at that party. But he loves this girl, but he doesn't know what to do. Just giving him the blues, man. That's it. Also, the first single off this album, Bell Bottom Blues. Then it goes to Keep On Growing. So last song without Dwayne. The first 3 songs do not have Dwayne on them. I didn't guess any of them right. Keep On Growing, and I believe that it's Patty telling Eric, she loves him, but at this point it's a friendly thing. She cares about Eric. She doesn't want to see him the way that he is. At the recording of this album, before, during, and after, Eric's in the middle of alcoholism, heroin addiction, a cocaine problem. She's telling him, better yourself. Keep on growing. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's not, it's not. You know? So, that's what that song's about. And Dwayne shows up. Just for, so Dwayne comes in. For Nobody Knows You, When You're Down and Out. This is a cover tune. All three of those songs were written by Eric. This is a cover tune from a guy named Jimmy Cox. I know a few blues musicians have played this song before, but in my interpretation of Eric's story, this is Eric. He's remembering all the good times, like when he was in Cream, when he was in Blind Faith, where he had all this money, he was kind of a superstar, but now he's drank and snorted and all that's gone now. And he doesn't know what's going to make him happy. He's lost all his friends. Most of his friends. He hangs out at Herwood Edge and just gets fucked up all day. That's what he does. That's his life. So, that's how that goes. And he's just fallen deeper into the abyss. Then they come in with I Am Yours. And this is a cool song. First I'll tell you, has some really cool different slide guitar from Dwayne in it. It's very J.J. Cale inspired to me. J.J. Cale was a singer-songwriter back then. Eric got very influenced by him. So this song is like that. It has some very cool slide guitar in it that you can tell it's Dwayne, but it's very different from his normal style, I would say. And this is Clapton saying, there's probably some other girls out there that might be coming by her, whatever, and blah blah blah. But he doesn't love them. He doesn't love them. He loves Patty. I'm yours. Then they get into, I'm gonna put these two together, Any Day and Key to the Highway. And this is just, Clapton. He's got Patty off his mind for a minute. And he's just jamming with his friends. These two songs to me just sound like friends jamming. And especially Key to the Highway, which doesn't really fit in to here. It's just them jamming, playing a song by Big Bill Broonzy, and just having fun. And that song, Key to the Highway, has a famous fade-in on it. And that's because Tom Dowd was actually in the bathroom when they started just kind of fucking around on it. And he came running out of the bathroom, flipped up all his faders, and, got everything dialed in and recorded it. But they have to start the track somehow. So there's a fade-in on the track. So it kind of comes in as they're jamming. So that's Eric just having fun with his buddies, those two songs. Then I think it flips. Let me check the disc real quick. Yep, it changes to the second disc at this point. So Key to the Highway is the last song on the first disc. So then it goes to Tell the Truth. This is Clapton being mad again. He's mad at Patty. Tell me what you want. What are you doing? Just tell me. Let me go or be with me. And quit playing me. And Duane Allman just goes nuts on this song. Excellent slide guitar. Just Duane going nuts. So that's a great track. We get into Why Does Love Got to Be So Sad? This is a classic Eric Clapton song. It's got that Clapton groove. This is the first one that I thought there was no Duane Allman on, actually. This is one that I guess there was no Duane on, because it sounds like one guitar. Except for the solo, which I thought Eric probably just double-tracked it. But apparently, Duane's on this. But it's a classic Eric just groove. And it's just him still thinking about Patty and, why can't I get over her? Why does love got to be so sad? Just a classic Eric tune. Then he kind of shifts into Full Despair again, where it's Have You Ever Loved a Woman? Which I think is an Elmore James tune. I know a lot of... It's written by a guy named Billy Myers, who I don't know. I know a lot of blues musicians have covered it. So, yeah, it's just Eric in full despair. His addiction is getting worse. It's getting, it's kind of getting the best of him. He just doesn't know what to do. This is another one that I thought that there was no Dwayne on. This is one that I guessed, but I guess he's on it. So, who knows? Then I think the disc flips over at this point. Yep, we're in the home stretch. And they start laying it down. It opens up with a cover of Little Wing by Jimi Hendrix. Now, this was Jimmy's original version. Great version. Was released 3 years earlier. They kind of dumb it down here. Little Wing is a tough song to play. It's like 24 bars of different chords before it repeats itself. And it's not really chords that I would put together. And it's not, and if you're playing guitar on it, it's not, if you're going to play it like Jimmy, it's not like the full chords. A lot of like arpeggiated shit and stuff. So it's kind of weird. So Derek and the Dominoes kind of dumb it down. I'm not saying that this one isn't great, because this song is great. There's a couple awesome guitar solos on there. But Little Wing's hard. There's not that many covers out there of it. Most people that do try fuck it up. Raycon plays a great version that I used to play with him. My favorite version, obviously the Jimmy version is really good, but my favorite version is the Stevie Ray Vaughan version, where he kind of covers it note for note at first, and then takes it and makes it like just real bluesy. That's very cool. It's a hard song to play though. Even if you're just playing bass on it, it's a hard song to play. But to me, that's just Eric and his buddies playing. They just want to jam a Hendrix tune. So then it goes into It's Too Late. And I don't like this song because it's just Eric having a pity party for himself. And he's kind of future tripping. And he's wrong about it. His future trip. This is the last one that I thought that there was no Dwayne on. I knew that Dwayne did not play on 3 songs. So mine was Love Got to Be So Sad, Have You Ever Loved a Woman, and It's Too Late. Those were the 3 I thought he didn't play on. Actually, he just didn't play on the first 3 songs on the album. So then Eric throws down the gauntlet. Layla comes on. And he comes in like a fucking hurricane. So Eric and his boys are just throwing it down at this point. He's kind of yelling at her. He's kind of begging her. He's just putting it all out there. So, Layla is the pinnacle of the album. Then they have that long jam at the end where I think his friends just come in and say, "Hey, let's send this one out. Let's send this one out on a just a tear." And they jam for a pretty damn long time. And it's cool. It's real cool. Then the last song, which kind of reminds me of the end to Matchbox 20's Yourself or Someone Like You, but it's Thorn Tree in Your Garden. And this comes directly from what the old inspiration for Layla is a poem. I think it's Middle Eastern, it might just be Eastern, called Layla and the Majnun. It's a poem from somewhere. Old, very old. It's about Majnun, who I think wrote it. He falls in love as a child with this princess, Layla. And they grow old and they're in love, and Majnun wants to marry Layla, but Majnun is a commoner. He can't. No, her father forbids it, and she goes off and marries somebody else. I think she dies young. I do. I think I might be wrong on that, but I think she dies young. And Majnun is just left without anything, and he goes insane. And it's a sad poem, and that's the inspiration behind calling it Layla. Is this guy goes mad because he loves a girl that he can't have. It's very similar to the album. It's very similar to the book Wuthering Heights, where Heathcliff loves Catherine, but he can't have her. Heathcliff goes mad. All that. I don't know when Wuthering Heights came out, and I forget who it's by. But if you look up Wuthering Heights, you can kind of get the short version, probably on Wikipedia or some shit. I've read the book. I have the book somewhere. Another cool thing about Thorn Tree in Your Garden is it's just all of them in a circle and one mic in the middle. And it sounds really good on that one mic. Okay, so in late 1970, Layla is released. And it doesn't do that well. People don't realize that Derek is Eric. They just think Derek and the Dominoes is just some other band. And it's hard to get discovered, man. Especially back then. Especially if kind of you want to stay hidden like Eric did. He goes into a pretty long isolation at Hurtwood Edge where he doesn't do anything. He goes out to get booze and drugs, and actually most of the time it's brought to him. So he doesn't have to do anything. He's got money. He just wants to, get fucked up all day, and that's it. Wallow in despair. Eventually, in 1974. Oh, also, important thing to note: the Beatles had broken up, and in 1970, George releases All Things Must Pass. So you have Layla and All Things Must Pass going on at the same time. And Patty inspired a ton of songs on both of those albums. So, let's see. In 1974, Eric releases 461 Ocean Boulevard, which was another house that he had. I believe in California. I believe. At this time, Patty and George are broken up, and Patty goes with Eric on tour. And it's fun for a while. They're having fun, being on tour, all that. But they both, Eric's still in his active addiction, and he brings Patty down with him. So both of them, they're drinking a lot, they're partying a lot, just not good. Eventually, they break up. Eric, he tours a little bit, but he mostly goes back into his self-isolation. And then in 1979, he asks Patty to marry him. And she says yes, and they get married. Eric does another tour. It's much better this time around. They stay married for 10 years until 1989. So that is pretty much the story of Layla. And that album has a lot of personal connection to me, in my life. When I was a kid, when I first heard it, then when I met and started falling in love with my wife. Now, my life is now. There's a lot of things that speak to me on this album. It's just one of my favorite albums ever. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. This is artwork. The artwork on here, it's one of my favorite paintings ever. Actually, I wanted, or still want, a tattoo of this. But it's by Frederick, I think his name's Schomburg is the artist's name. Just great painting. I think it's very cool. So that's it for Layla. If you liked it, give me a like. We'll do more of these. where either I tell the stories that I know, or like I said, I researched this to make sure I had all my facts right. And then gave my own interpretation. So I'll try to pick something out for tomorrow, and then I think I got something special cooking for Monday. We'll see. So have fun. If you liked it, give it a like. If you really like it, give me a subscribe. I'm trying to get my channel to kind of take off just so I can share with you guys. Have a good one. Bye.